Welcome everybody to another episode of Hot Seat Automotive Podcast. Your buddy CJ here. I am joined this evening by a good friend of mine, Scott. Now, I met Scott through the automotive car scene here in the Charlotte area. We became fast friends. We share a lot of common interests, including a couple things we're going to talk about tonight. But first things first, I want to welcome Scott. Thanks for coming, buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me on here, CJ. I appreciate
Good
it.
stuff. Good stuff. Heck of a guy, an incredible background. Scott, no kidding. We could do an entire podcast, I think, just based on some of the adventures you've had in life in general. We'll save that for another day. Uh, for the benefit of our audience, just give us 20 seconds, the elevator speech, if you will. Who is Scott as an automotive enthusiast? Give us your stats as a car guy. Go ahead.
Um, well, unlike you, CJ, I was an 80s child and I grew up with all my friends as a teenager in the 80s, getting road and track and car and driver and having the posters on the wall and just drooling over all this stuff. And we used to play this game where we'd take our crappy cars we had and take them to a dealership that would give us some interest and let them test drive a car. And then we take that car and we take it to a better dealership. And then we would test drive that car and then take it to a better dealership. And by the end of the day, we were driving a Porsche and then we return them all by the end of the day. And we just like, that's what we love to do. We were car nuts. I was poor, but we did whatever we could do to our cars just to have fun. But we always dreamed and had the posters, and that was our thing.
Wow. Listen, I just when you think you've heard it all, man, I hadn't heard of that. But look, Scott, where'd you grow up? What was the car scene like when Scott was a kid?
Minnesota, so not the greatest car scene in the world, so we had to do what we could do. But we had a we had a few people that we knew that had some cool stuff, and man, this probably get me in trouble, but I'm a Porsche guy, and the
Hmm.
the reason I'm a Porsche guy is my best friend. I'm sorry, Jeff, if your mother sees this, but she was single mom and she had a 1985 911 Targa, and she traveled for work a lot, and when she traveled, she didn't hide the keys very well. So we would take that thing out and we have fun, and that's why I'm a Porsche guy, because I just fell in love with that dream someday I can have a cool car.
Mm,
I had crappy cars back then.
yeah. Well, one of the cars, and you and I talk about this all the time, Scott, and I know at one point you owned a Fiero, which is a
I
kind of a
did, yeah.
that's a controversial car because when we were kids, it was all about the V8 muscle or super sports cars. The Fiero was kind of, hey, it was mid-engine long before the C8 was mid-engine, but it wasn't really a performance monster. What was that like? How did Scott end up with a Fiero?
I I drove that car, and I was one of those guys who would just, my friends and I used to go through, we had some places in parks where we would go do a time lapse. It was like a kind of, nobody was around, and there would be all these curves, and we would do stopwatches and see who could go the fastest through these tight turns. And we would test each other and learn how to drive. And then I got that mid-engine Fiero. It didn't have any power, but that thing for the 80s it handled pretty good.
Mm,
And like, I learned how to drive that car, manual transmission in the snow in Minnesota, learned how to slide around a corner and learn some car control, and before I even got my license, we used to have this college that was really close to my house, and my friends and
mm.
I used to ride our bikes out to this college on the weekends and kind of just goof around on the campus. And we were out there one day, and their SCCA had an autocross event, and we saw these cool cars, and there were MR2, CRXs, Fieros, that kind of thing. And they're out there doing this really cool autocross stuff. And we're like, what is this? And so we started hanging out with them and learned. And like the day I got my license, I went out and bought a Fiero and went over and started autocrossing of the SCCA. My parents probably thought I was doing something way worse than what I was doing, but they didn't know.
Wow. 16 years old, Scott started racing. Let me be real honest with listeners tonight and with everybody out there. Folks, if you find yourself lined up on a track and you look over and it's Scott in his Porsche GT4, beware. Look, literally, I'm going to tell a story on myself and y'all can make fun of me. I've been on a track hot lap contest where both Scott and I won awards. Scott's award was for the fastest lap. Mine was for the slowest lap. But in all seriousness, Scott, you're a hell of a driver, man. How the hell did you get all that track experience? I mean, you started at 16?
Yeah, but I mean, I took a 20-year break for the family and kids and all that, so I took a long break and then I got back into it about 10 years ago. And it's just, I gave up golf because I love doing it way more than golfing.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, Scott, let's get into this.
You did smoke me in a drag race, though, CJ. I'll give you, with your launch control on your horsepower, you did beat me in a drag race. I'll give you credit to that.
Listen, you stop rubbing in the launch control thing. It's all about the driver, because I got techniques. Look at my hands. Look at the steady hands. But no, in all seriousness, let's get into this. Scott, tonight, rock and roll and cars and rock and roll. Across the era, look, you and I can probably agree, the 80s, probably the greatest decade for music. The convergence of music videos, different genres, hard rock, metal, pop, new wave, rap up and coming, the genesis of hip hop, all these cool things converged. As part of that culture, and I know as a child, I'm not really a child of the 80s per se, but I grew up in the 80s. And I spent a lot of my time with vinyl and watching music videos. And I loved cars and I loved music. What is it about the car culture integrating and intermingling with music, the world of rock and roll? What's been your experience with that? Do you agree with me? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I had, well, at least for our generation, it had a lot to do with freedom, because we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have social media. And when we got our license, that was our ticket to freedom. That's when you put away the BMX bike and you just go out and crank some music and go drive with your friends. And they were together. It was like a synonymous type of thing. They just went together. You think about like Molly Crew, Kickstart Your Heart, it's all about racing. And even recently, there's a commercial that I love that was a few years ago. It was what's his name? He was the CEO of Ford at the time, but he had a commercial like 5 or 6 years ago with a new Mustang. He's like, there's nothing like a V8 noise and playing rock and roll. And he made sure they had really good stereos in their cars. And do you remember that commercial I'm talking about?
I'm trying to remember. That's not ringing a bell for me right now.
It's a great commercial. It played for 2 years probably, and it just hits home. Like you get that freedom, and I think rock and roll and having a car on an open road up in the mountains or wherever, it just has that feeling of freedom. They're hand in hand. I think they go together.
I want to put something up on screen if I can, Scott, and I want to get your reaction to it. First thing that comes to mind, memory, and let's hope that technology gods are good to us. Does this work? You seeing that?
Oh yeah.
So when I think about music and cars, rock and roll and cars, one of the icons that comes out, look like ZZ Top, Eliminator, the Legs video. This became an icon. And it was like, overload to be a young man coming up in that era, you know, adrenaline, testosterone overload, you know, to see those music videos. Oh my God, look at that car. Look at those girls. Listen to those riffs. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It was the whole thing together. Do you agree?
It was all together. That was just that was the generation we grew up in. It was just, that's what you had. You had those posters on your wall, and that was your dream. And you're like, someday I'm gonna have a cool car like that. I had to wait a long time. To get something cool like that, but I never gave up on it.
Mm. What was on Scott's playlist? Let's say 1984, 1986. What are we talking about here? Do you have a little Depeche Mode playing? Was it Slayer? What are we talking about?
What, 85?
Yeah, right in there. 84 to 86.
84 to 86 is probably a lot of hair band metal stuff, but I also, I liked some of the NXS and Depeche Mode and all that type of stuff too. But really, like Molly Crew and Quiet Riot, and like that was the stuff that really That was the stuff that really got me going. Like I'm in my car and I'm driving fast, and I always drove way too fast back then. Well, okay, still, but that's what I'm cranking.
Mm. You know, I can relate. One of the things that I think this generation, our kids, the generation after that, one of the things they'll never appreciate is the mixtape. Scott, can you relate? It's 1980s. You got your driver's license. You're getting ready to cruise. But before you go out, you got to make a mixtape because we can't sit there and listen to FM. We didn't have Pandora, folks. We didn't have Spotify. Uh, you know, whether it was Rat or Beastie Boys or whatever it might be, you had to get the mix
Like,
right for you and your boys. Oh, good.
yeah, the mixtape was the thing back then. You had a whole glove box full of mixtapes, and it's funny. I wish you've probably never seen it. I have people don't know me. I have a old 80s 944, and my sunscreen I have for it is a Memorex mixtape sunscreen that you put in the windshield. So the mixtape, yeah, that still holds true.
Yep, no doubt. So what's I'm gonna put up another picture here in a minute, and I want to get your reaction to it, Scott.
It better not be a Tesla truck.
No, we had enough of that for one day, didn't we? But yeah, hey man, take a look at this. I just want to get your reaction. Tell me your relationship with what I'm about to show you. Let's see. Hopefully this works, Scott.
Well, yeah, that's my baby right there almost.
Why is this your baby, and what's your relationship to it?
That was the car. That was the car that I just, maybe it was the car that I dreamed about because it was kind of attainable back then. I mean, obviously, all the movies, 16 Candles, that was like the cool new car. And it wasn't the one they're like, hey, I got to be super rich to get it. It's like, I can get one of these someday. And it only took me 37 years to get one, but I always wanted one, and I still drive that thing to work a couple days a week, and absolutely love it. It's analog, it's old, it's got nothing special to it, but it's just a joy to drive.
Mm.
And the reactions I get from people on that are, I have nicer cars than that, but that's the one that everyone's like, hey, that's I love that car, and they always bring up, you know, growing up and always loving that thing, and I think the lines are timeless on that.
Mm. It's hard to argue. It's hard to argue. Um, do you, talk about, what's the experience as a Porsche owner and having driven a bunch of different Porsches? I think Porsche's brand has evolved, tastes have evolved. I always say, and I don't mean any shade with this, like when I was a kid, the Porsche was like the dentist's car. Like you're right, the 944 was attainable, but like, you think about the 928, the 911, that was like the country club dude. Certainly not how I grew up and not how you grew up, but that's just how I envisioned it. Fast forward in the modern era, you know, tastes changed, things evolved. I mean, the GT cars. Now you own one of the GT cars. I mean, talk about that. Talk about not only your journey with the Porsche brand, but how it's evolved over the years.
You guys kind of covered this in a recent cast, so I won't get into the whole evolution with the air cooled to water cooled and the SUVs, which made it necessary for Porsche to survive. And by the way, I mean I have a Macan, and I don't ever see me not owning a Macan ever because it's phenomenal. But it's not really a Porsche. It is a Porsche, but it's not really a Porsche. It's not the same connection that you get with everybody else. But it was, I mean, for me, it was just always like a goal in life. Something I drove me to work hard. Someday I'm gonna have one, and I got one about 10 years ago, and that I let that one go, and then it just kept evolving, and I wish I had a big barn so I could fill it up with affordable, cool Porsches.
Yeah, no, listen, and there are a bunch of them, right? There are a bunch of them. Scott, let me ask you this. Let me put you on the hot seat for a minute. Here we are. Hard to believe we're looking at 2024, man. You're a car guy. You've been in this hobby for a long time. What's your prediction for 2024? What's coming down the pike? Maybe some surprises that you see. What are we going to see in the automotive market? What's the next big thing? Go ahead.
I think that the last few years we've seen the pinnacle, kind of like they did in the late '60s with the muscle car era, but we've seen a pinnacle of performance cars that I don't think we'll ever see again. You have 500 horsepower used to be ridiculous, unobtainable, and now you get that in an SUV. It's ridiculous, but that's going away. Now the electric market, everybody knows that that's not going as well as everybody thought it was going to go. And I think you have 20% of the people out there who really wanted them and they have them. And there's a lot of people out there who don't want them. So that's why you're starting to see, Ford and Mercedes and General Motors and everybody start to kind of back off what they were doing, because maybe that's not the answer. But there's some technologies happening out there which were covered. Harvey talked about in your last one with the Porsche alternate fuels and a lot of things that are, I think, really going to shake the market up. But there's always going to be guys like you and I, CJ, that want a throaty V8 and they don't care what kind of mileage it gets, and maybe they don't drive it to work every day, but they want to be able to go out and just have fun with that car.
No doubt. Scott, I got to put you on the hot seat again. I'm going to show you another image, and I want to know, you got to tell me right now, is this the greatest music video of all time?
Yes, that is the greatest music video of all time, no doubt.
All right. And for those that don't know, either you're generationally challenged or you just don't know about the 80s. This is Aha Take on Me. And I don't know, man, I remember this video, MTV generation. And the cool thing about this is you kind of have the animation thing going. You know, there was like the John Fogerty claymation thing. There was Dire Straits, Money for Nothing with the clay things. But this had a different vibe, Scott.
Yeah,
And it also included like these automotive, the automotive racers. It kind of had the new wave
Speed
vibe
Racer.
to it.
Yep, Speed Racer.
Yeah.
I've shown that to my daughters who are in their early 20s, and they agree. They're like, that's the coolest music video I've ever seen.
All right. I'm going to put you on the hot seat again. Uh, you and I were hanging out the other night, and I pulled out Auto Trader, and we started looking at stuff. It's kind of what car guys do: Auto Trader, bring a trailer. What's Scott got his eyes on right now? I know you've got the 944, and you made it just the way you want it. And you told me the other night, you said, CJ, I'm never selling this car. But if you're, I know you, and I know you're like me. You always got your eye on something. What's got Scott's eye these days?
A bigger garage.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I need to find a place to put some stuff. But yeah, I mean, I've grown the Mustang Camaro thing. I've been a Mustang guy, but right now I really got my eye on like an IROC Camaro, like a late '80s IROC Camaro. I just think they're so cool. Um, I think it's a good investment as well because they're definitely on the uptake. So I think that's really cool. But also going back to the story I told you earlier, a 85 911 Targa, the one that made me fell in love with Porsche, like before those skyrocket, I want to get one of those. But the IROC is cool too.
Well, listen, the third gens, and for those of us who lived through it, you know, that car didn't get a lot of love from like our father's generation. It was just such a departure. They started to go with much different lines. Emissions took emissions and safety regulations and other things started to have their way with the performance of these vehicles. You look at I had a Camaro with a 305 in it and had what was known as the peanut cam. Scott,
Yeah,
I kid you not, it was
180 horsepower.
yeah, literally. There was some good torque with those. The styling go, but over time they've kind of come into their own, haven't they?
Yeah, I think they're really. You're starting to see them more at shows, and when I see one at a show, I always go over and talk to the owner.
Yeah.
But honestly, the next car that I'm going to get is that your head's gonna blow up when I say this, but
Uh-oh.
it's a Carmen G. I
Now,
love me a Carmen G.
and for those that don't know, tell our listeners, because they'll say, huh, a Carmen, what? Is that something you order at a sophisticated restaurant? What's a Carmen Gate, Scott?
A Carmen G is basically a Volkswagen Beetle with a beautiful body that was designed by some of the Ferrari designers. It's just gorgeous. It's just it's got maybe 95 horsepower, but it's just beautiful. And I want like a pastel convertible. I just think it's a cool car.
Well,
And
here,
I think a big part of that was I'm a big Quentin Tarantino fan, and Kill Bill. It was featured in Kill Bill, which is what made me really get stuck on that car.
yep. And is
Yeah,
this one's coming through? Yeah, I think this looks like an older one, right? This is probably this is going way back, isn't it?
I think that's actually a newer one with the front bumper on it.
Is it really? Okay. I don't know my
Yeah,
gear.
yeah. So that's maybe an early '70s one. I kind of like the late '60s without that bumper.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Uma Thurman almost died filming that movie in one of those. She had a big crash and was in the hospital for a month.
I didn't
Fun
know
story.
that. And the thing I like about the Carmen G is it's not a car you're going to see every day. Like, you know, you go to a car meet, you go to a cruise, whatever. You're going to see Chevelles. You're going to see Mustangs. You're going to see some vintage Porsches, maybe. Carmen Ghia pulls in for those of us that are fans of those beautiful lines. I don't claim to be an expert on the Carmen Ghia platform, but you see it and you know what it is. It's like, wow, it's not a performance monster by any stretch.
No, not at all.
But that's not why you buy it in 2023, 2024. You buy it to enjoy it, All right, I got to put you, this is a polarizing topic, man. I'm going to show you something, and this is back on the topic of music, but music as it relates to car guys. And you mentioned Motley Crue earlier, which, come on, just love Motley Crue, and God knows they had a lot of cool music, good music to drive to in the 80s and now. But what about this? This is a polarizing album from Judas Priest.
Yeah.
Is
that breaking the law?
No, this is, oh, come on, Scott. Come on. This is Turbo. This is when all the metalheads lost their minds because Judas Priest introduced synthesizers and kind of went all MTV, So
yeah, I mean, I all that stuff just resonates together with me growing up with the car culture. So CJ, I'm gonna put you. Can I put you on the hot spot?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
I'm gonna put you on the hot spot, and I'm gonna put viewers on the hot spot too. I like to play a game. And you have to follow the rules of the game. You have a 10-car garage, all right, and you have $1 million total to spend to fill that garage. So you can blow half of it on a Countach or something like that, but you have to fill the car for $1 million of today's market value, 10 cars, and to make it a little harder, one of them is a movie car.
One of them is a movie car. Okay. Actually, this is
one of them is a movie car.
Now, a question on the rules of the game, Scott, because I follow rules. But in all seriousness, does it have to be 10 or can it be 6? Is it capped at 10?
It's capped at 10.
Okay, then this is easy. All right, and I love this game. This is fun, number one.
Well, what's fun about it is if you follow market values, you have to change your list sometimes.
Yeah.
Maybe something was on your, like a Countach used to be on my list back when it was 200,000, but now they're what, 6?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. I got other stuff I'm going to put in there now. But what's your movie car? Let's start with that, CJ. What's your movie car?
Movie car starts and ends in the same spot, brother. Gotta be a Bandit Trans Am.
Yeah, I saw that coming.
No brainer. Man, that movie, so iconic. And that car, I had the Hot Wheels. I had the Matchbox. This is how I always say I grew up as a Corvette guy. 3rd gen Camaro, you're speaking my language. But certainly Smokey and the Bandit as sort of the 2nd gen of, the Pontiac TA. How iconic. How iconic. If I had to summarize who I wanted to be in 1982, it was Burt Reynolds. Okay, in 1982, I could not grow a mustache, and I had other issues. Let's not get into that. But in all seriousness, I wanted to be Burt Reynolds in the Smokey and the Bandit TA. Period.
Well, you were that for Halloween, right?
Yeah, it took me a long time to buy that jacket, that vinyl jacket.
Yeah, we got a picture of us somewhere with you as
absolutely. And listen, I want that.
I think Freddy Krueger, maybe, I don't know.
Yep. Now, hey, and I'll give you my other answers in a minute. But have you seen? I'd say it's Resto Mod, but it's really not. what they did was they took modern Camaro platforms and they converted them so that they looked like Trans Ams, even though they were Chevys. Have you seen these?
Yeah, I don't like it.
I don't love it, but it's kind of cool to see. I don't know. I don't know if I'd ever buy one, but I still think it's cool.
I'm glad they did it, but
All right.
I'd rather have an old Trans Am with, yeah.
All right. So now that we got the movie car out of the way, that's going to be something I'm going to, it's going to sit there and stink up the garage, smell like gas, and it's going to leak. And some days it ain't going to want to start. But in all seriousness, that good old classic car, listen, I want that. I need that in the garage. Now I need something I can drive. What do we say? Something I could drive the shit out of. Good for road trips. Go to the grocery store with it. I'll go with something that I don't think it's going to surprise you. Actually, to me, it's probably the best trim for the Porsche 911. If you actually want to drive it every day and drive the wheels off it and go to the beach with it and go 400-mile road trip, 911 Carrera S, goosed out with sports chrono package. I want everything in it. I want a color like a guard's red, maybe something else. It's just the perfect 911, Scott. Look, I love a Turbo S when I see it. GT3, are you kidding me? But that Carrera S just does everything well.
Yep. I would probably go GTS, but that's not much different.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're 150 in.
Okay,
you're another 50 in for your Bandit car, at least.
Okay. All right, then look, it's going to be one of two.
You got 8 more.
I know, but now, so I got the classic car. I got the daily and let's just have fun. Let's go on road trips car, and I could do anything with it. That's the 911 Carrera S or GTS. I do a GTS. Now something special. I want a car that every time I get in it, it's an occasion. Maybe that sounds kind of bougie. Y'all can make fun of me. But no,
absolutely.
Look,
you have to have one of those.
Right? Like you got to have something in that category, I think. Given $1 million budget, I'm going to have something in that bucket. And it's either going to be something from Lamborghini or something from McLaren. It's not going to be Ferrari. Sorry, Ferrari guys. Listen, we'll have a whole other episode on that, Scott, but I just can't get behind the brand. They're beautiful cars. They're incredible cars. I'm just not about Ferrari for a lot of reasons. I'll look at any Ferrari. I've driven a bunch of Ferraris. I will probably not buy one. McLaren, all English cars have gremlins, and they're all weird. But I got my eye on some 720Ss, convertibles. It'll be a McLaren 720S. If not, it'll probably be a Lamborghini Huracan of some trim. Or the Huracan replacement. Would I throw an Aventador in there or Revoluto, the replacement for the Aventador? Maybe, but not just for the sake of spending money. Like, I know I still have a lot left in that $1 million budget, Scott. But again, even though it's a special car, the Huracan or the McLaren 720S, those are still two cars you can drive and not feel like, wow, this thing belongs solely on a track and I'm scared and it sucks and it's uncomfortable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Actually, I could get both. I could get both for that budget. So there.
So
go ahead.
I hear you, but if Tony's out there,
Yeah.
I want a 458 Italia. That is, to me, the most beautiful lines of any car ever made. And I get it. I know Ferraris are a pain in the butt, but I would blow. What is that? What's a 458 cost?
You're 3 to 4 for the one you'd want. Like you're at least at 3 in the current market, in my view. I could be wrong. People will throw shade at me if I'm wrong, but around 3.
That's my big chunk, though. That's what's replaced the old Countach.
Well,
so that's replaced the Countach as my flashy car in there.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to argue with the 458 in the 458 versus the 488. And I know most people will immediately say, I'd rather have the Ferrari 458 over the 488. I say, why not both? No, listen, I think they're both incredible. Hard to argue with the lines on that 458, man. That's a car in convertible form. Oh my God. The right color combination, the right interior. Woo! I mean, they're just beautiful. They're just beautiful specimens.
Yeah.
Now, there's something else I forgot. You ready for this? I do still have budget. So I'm going to spend my damn budget. Thank you very much. And I forgot to include something that I can go to Lowe's or Home Depot and load her up. And, or I'm going to put a gang of people in and go terrorize the community and drive. No, I'm kidding. Chevy Suburban, and Scott, you may disagree, and I don't care who disagrees. The best SUV ever. It's too big. I know it's ridiculously big, but if you're into performance vehicles only, Chevy Suburban is not for you. You are not going to track a Chevy Suburban or have fun on mountain roads. But if you want comfort for a road trip and you want to bring 5 of your best oversized friends with you and you want to load it up with luggage and candy and bags of potatoes and some lumber, you need a Chevy Suburban. So I'm going to get a goosed out 4-wheel drive. What is it? Not an LTZ package Chevy Suburban. What do you think, Scott?
I don't think that's a bad choice. You need to have something practical in that garage.
Yeah.
I would do a Land Rover, though.
Now, you keep talking about the Countach. Is that your dream vintage exotic?
Kind of, until I drove one.
Oh, you drove one?
Yeah, I drove one many years ago, and I thought it was going to be the greatest thing ever, and it's not. It's better to look at than it is. It's not really a very good car to drive.
Scott, people don't realize we get spoiled in the Charlotte area and in other areas in these days, but what it meant in the 80s, for example. Lamborghini Countach was a poster, and it was in Motor Trend and Car and Track. That's it. It did not exist in my neighborhood. It was not a car that your dad's buddy had, unless your dad was also at the country club. And, I always think of like the Tom Cruise movie, The Firm, or Wall Street or something like that from the 80s. Like that was Hollywood, man. And fast forward to today, you and I have seen Countach. You've driven one, but you can see them. They're out there. But in that era, people don't realize Ferraris, Lamborghinis, they were in magazines, Scott, but they were not a part of our lives, were they?
No, not in my neighborhood that I grew up in, that's for sure. I saw a Countach one time in like 1988. I was driving with my friends, and we just followed that thing for like an hour just so we could hear it. And we're like, "That's the coolest thing we've ever seen." And we just drove behind it. They probably thought we were stalking them, but we were just in love looking at one live. It wasn't Cannonball Run. It wasn't a movie. It wasn't. I think I had 2 Countach posters on my wall. But to see one live one time, like we freaked out. I don't remember where we were supposed to be going, but we didn't go there. We just followed this white Countach around for like an hour.
Crazy. All right, one more question for you, Scott. And that was fun, by the way, the game. We got to play that again. If someone wanted to get into a little bit of motorsports, they wanted to up their game in this hobby. They love cars, but they've never been on a track. And let's be honest, we'll be real. A lot of people scared. Like that scares the crap out of a lot of people. The notion of getting on a track, let's set aside drag strips for a minute, but how does one enter that aspect of the hobby? Do you have to be direct lineage to Mario Andretti? Do you have to have the fastest reflexes? Do you have to be under 30 years old? Talk to us about how you get started messing around with track days. Go ahead.
Well, I'll start with saying what not to do. So they do the thing called Track Night in America, and there's maybe 10 events a year in Charlotte, and you see it's a great event, don't get me wrong, but you see people out there who have no idea how to drive, and they are terrifying on the track. They're scary. So what you want to do is you want to get into autocross. Autocross is something you can go do on a Saturday afternoon. They have a lot of events, SCCA, Porsche Club, which you don't need to have a Porsche for. We invite everybody to Triad Sports Club, a lot of autocross events. And you go out and you spend an afternoon, and you probably won't break 70 miles an hour. And they have short tracks where it's set up in a big parking lot with a lot of cones, and it's very technical. And you're going to spin out the first couple of times you do it, but you're going to learn how to drive. And if you haven't done it before, they'll give you an instructor. They got helmets you can use. All you got to do is show up in really anything. You can't show up in an SUV, but you can show up in your Civic or whatever. And if you just don't have the means and you just want to learn how to drive, you can take anything out there. They got like 100 different classes, but the first time you go out, you just like do novice classes, and you have fun, and all you're doing is getting faster and better and learning.
Right.
And you learn so much car control. And that's the way to go. And then you do that for a little while, and then you're like, okay, maybe you want to go on a big track. And then you go on a big track, and that's when you start, using tires and brakes and stuff. But autocross, you take your mom's car out on an autocross on the weekend, and she won't even know you did it. You're not going to wear out any tires. You're not going to wear any brakes. You're not going to hurt the car. You're just going to have fun.
Sounds like great advice. Scott. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. What a blast, Scott. You're a good friend. You're a legend on certain tracks. Oh, why am I making your head that big? I need to stop. No, but listen, well, I guess consider the source. But listen, appreciate having you on. Always good to talk to you. You're a good friend. You're a heck of a guy. Scott, have a great night. Merry Christmas and happy holidays. Folks, thanks again for tuning in to Hot Seat Automotive Podcast. This is the place where gearheads talk about this stuff, and we have a hell of a lot of fun doing it. So thank you, Scott. Enjoy the rest of your evening, brother.
All right. Thanks a lot, CJ. Have a good night.
See you soon.